Part 69. In the eyes of these people, a human life is as low as an ant. Today's early morning, there is no accident. Most people are impeaching Yi Yang, asking Jun Yi to execute Yi Yang, who had cheated on the eunuch. As an example, Yi Yan has the intention to help his son, but now Yi Yang has committed an unforgivable crime. He does not dare to implicate the entire Yi family. So he has to bow his head and pray for Yi Yang, wishing him to survive this crisis. Jun Yi had long known that these officials would impeach Yi Yang early this morning, so he was not unhappy at all, but looked at Xu Yuan with a smile on his face, which made Xu Yuan inexplicably feel a chill rushing from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. The officials who impeached Yi Yang saw that the emperor was not angry, and they were a little unsure in their hearts. I wonder if Jun Yi had already thought of a solution. Or did he plan to give up Yi Yang who greened hat him? Just when everyone's thoughts were different, Lord Zhongling, who had arrived late, walked into the Holy Harmony Hall. He raised the memorial in his hand above his head, knelt down and said, "Your Majesty, the imperial concubine has all confessed." This is the imperial concubine herself. The confession from the painting. Impossible. The little girl is kind. How could she harm young Master Yi? It must be young Master Yi who framed my little girl. Xu Yuan finally understood what Jun Yi's smile meant before. It turned out to be his own daughter secretly frame Yi Yang. Nature is kind? Jun Yi looked at Xu Yuan with a half-smile, making Xu Yuan feel cold all over. Your Majesty, you can't do anything to the little girl. Little girl with thin skin. How could she withstand the torture of the sect's mansion? Xu Yuan fell to his knees, and the wicked complained first. He firmly believed that his daughter would not take the initiative to confess guilt, which made him feel confident that Jun Yi used torture to force his daughter to confess, so he dared to say so. What? Is this emperor so cruel in your eyes? Jun Yi's expression sank, his deep eyes narrowed slightly, like a wolf staring at his prey, which is terrifying. Xu Yuan was so frightened that he was sweating coldly, his whole body trembling uncontrollably, and he hurriedly replied, "I dare not. I dare not." He lowered his head and dared not make any comments. In his heart, he unanimously believed that it was the emperor who used severe punishment to force the imperial concubine to confess. Jun Yi also knew that these ministers did not believe, so he said loudly, "Come here, take the imperial concubine into the palace." After hearing this, everyone turned to look at the entrance of the main hall, wanting to see how Xu Qian was tortured. Without making everyone wait long, Xu Qian was taken into the Holy Harmony Hall by 2 guards. Although she was wearing a prison uniform, she still could not hide her beautiful appearance. Her pale face showed exhaustion, but this did not damage her. The beauty of it, on the contrary, reveals a pitiful appearance that I still feel pity for. Xu Qian never thought that she would be able to step into the Holy Harmony Hall in her lifetime, let alone enter the Holy Harmony Hall in such an embarrassed state. Kneel down. The 2 guards on the left and the right showed no pity, and forced her to kneel in the center of the hall, being watched by everyone. At this moment, those eyes were like the sharpest weapon in the world, repeatedly cutting her skin, causing tingling pain all over her body, which made her almost collapse. Xu Yuan was stunned when he looked at Xu Qian, who was in perfect condition. He didn't believe that his daughter just confessed without using any punishment. Seeing the unbelievable expressions of the ministers, Jun Yi sneered in his heart, and said to Xu Qian, who had a lifeless face, "Xu Qian, you bribed the eunuch in front and framed concubine Yi in the back. Do you feel guilty?" The concubine is convicted. Xu Qian, who was intimidated by Yi Yang all the way, lost her previous arrogance, and knelt down obediently to confess her guilt. She can't figure it out now. Where did Yi Yang know about so many tortures? What kind of terrifying tortures? Lighting sky lanterns, dismembering corpses, beheading, the death of 1,000 cuts, and people's animals? Especially snake human. She almost vomited when she heard the details of becoming an adult snake. She'd rather die than be made a fool. So, at this moment, she couldn't think of any resistance at all. Xiao He, tell Daddy. Did someone force you to say so? Don't be afraid, Daddy is here, and Daddy will support you. Xu Yuan didn't believe that his daughter would obediently plead guilty. And someone must have threatened his daughter. Listening to Xu Yuan's words, not only did Xu Qian he not feel any warmth in her heart, but instead, she was filled with resentment. If her father had not sent her to the palace for the sake of her future, her life would not have been so tragic. Does Xu Aiqing suspect that we are forcing your daughter to confess? Zhen Yi's cold voice resounded through the hall, frightening Xu Yuan to kowtow again and again, shouting, I dare not. Zhen Yi snorted heavily from the tip of his nose and said, Xu Qian he is an imperial concubine, but she does not have the magnanimity that an imperial concubine should have. Doing things to frame others is really against the sacred position of an imperial concubine. Today, I will give you a white silk ribbon to set an example. Xu Yuan instantly tears filled the old man and he pleaded, Your Majesty, although the little girl has made a big mistake, it won't cost her life. I also ask the emperor to take it back and spare the little girl's life. He just lost a son, and he didn't want to do this losing another daughter soon. His pleas not only did not get Xu Qian he's gratitude, but also attracted Xu Qian he's resentful eyes. Dad, do you want me to enter the cold palace? If there are only two options, death and cold palace, then she would rather choose death, and not choose the cold palace. She has seen the cruelty of the cold palace with her own eyes, especially since she has made too many enemies in the palace. Therefore, she would rather die now than commit suicide after being humiliated and tortured. Xu Yuan was intimidated by Xu Qian he's malicious eyes. He never thought that he would deliberately send his daughter into the palace, allowing her to enjoy the glory and wealth for so many years, but in the end, it was her daughter's resentment. This farce ended in Xu Qian he's suicide by hanging, Bai Jiyu being thrown into the cold palace, and the execution of all the eunuchs involved. Although some people still think that it was the emperor who threatened Xu Qian he and made Xu Qian he take the blame. The concubines of the East Palace, who knew Xu Qian he as a person, firmly believed that Xu Qian he bought others to frame Yi Yang. After the position of the imperial concubine in the East Palace was vacated, the concubines in the East Palace began to covet the position of the imperial concubine, and they all tried their best to please the emperor. Although they made full preparations, it was a pity that they didn't even see the shadow of the emperor, which made them happy for nothing. And Yi Yang, who was taught a lesson, also deeply realized that the people in the palace were dark, and he was afraid that he would encounter such a bad thing next time, so he accepted the 5 eunuchs sent by the emperor. These 5 eunuchs are quite honest, and they are full of their duties, and they never dare to do anything that is too much. As for Xiao Doubting, his daily duty is to brainwash these eunuchs in various ways. Anyway, he is the biggest emperor, and after that is Yi Yang. If anyone dares to bully Yi Yang, he will try his best to protect Yi Yang. This day, Xiao Doubting, who had nothing to do, called a few people to the front yard again and began to brainwash a few eunuchs. The same sentence, the young master is our heaven, our land. What does the young master have? Dangerous, we should be the first to rush up to help the young master to block all dangers. After the last incident, Xiao Doubting still had lingering fears. So he was determined not to allow such a thing to happen again. Therefore, he instilled one thing in these eunuchs every day, that is, they must be loyal to his young master and prevent the people from their Jin Yang palace from betraying Yi Yang. Yi Yang, who was basking in the sun, was speechless for a while, and really wanted to reply. If the imperial concubine asks me for trouble, will you stand by and listen quietly? Or will you rush up to fight with the imperial concubine? When Xiao Doubting's ridicule words had loopholes. A man in a lake blue robe walked into Jin Yang Palace. His expression showed a touch of anxiety, and shouted to Yi Yang, "Brother concubine Yi, it's not good." Something happened. Yi Yang followed the prestige and found that it was Lu Xuanzhou, and asked with a puzzled face, "What happened?" In the palace, he could tell Lu Xuanzhou that the two people's three views were almost the same, so when there was nothing, Lu Xuanzhou was often invited to come over, and he won a lot of money from Lu Xuanzhou. As a frequent visitor to the Jinyang Palace, Lu Xuanzhou could enter the Jinyang Palace by himself without being notified. "I passed by the Fuzi Palace just now, and it was very lively. So I stopped and listened for a while, and found that concubine Tianzi learned that Xiao Anzi was involved in your affairs, and was furious and wanted to kill Xiao Anzi." Lu Xuanzhou's voice just fell. Yi Yang rushed out of the Jinyang Palace in an instant, like an arrow from the string. "Young master, wait for the servant." Xiao Doubting, who was always paying attention to Yi Yang, left the crowd and chased after Yi Yang. Lu Xuanzhou was stunned. He had never seen such a fast person before. Of course, he couldn't possibly miss such a lively event, so he followed Yi Yang and headed to the Fuzi Palace. Leaving a few brainwashed eunuchs, "You look at me, I look at you. Don't know what happened for a while?" After they reacted, several people had long since disappeared. Thinking of the emperor's warning, they were so frightened that they hurried out of the Jinyang Palace and went to chase Yi Yang. In the distance, Yi Yang heard the tragic cry of the child, and he accelerated his running speed and ran towards Fuzi Palace. For the first time, he thought the palace was so big, and the voice was so close, but the distance was so far away. "Young master, slow down, slow down." Xiao Doubting ran out of breath behind him. Seeing Yi Yang running faster and faster, he was afraid that Yi Yang would fall, so he hurriedly asked Yi Yang to run slower. Yi Yang was exhausted, but he didn't stop, and because of the violent running, the air in his chest gradually thinned, and he couldn't breathe at all. And he didn't have the energy to answer Xiao Doubting's words. He buried his head and ran wildly, and finally arrived at Fuzi Palace a minute later. He was about to enter, but was stopped by two eunuchs. "I'm sorry, young Master Yi, my master said that he doesn't see anyone today." The two eunuchs looked apologetic, but Yi Yang was not allowed to enter. Hearing the screams of the children in the courtyard getting weaker and weaker, Yi Yang knew that the time was running out. He said, "Sorry," kicked over one of the eunuchs, and then ran into the Fuzi Palace while he was not prepared. As soon as he entered the Fuzi Palace, Yi Yang's eyes were instantly attracted to Xiao Anzi on the bench, only to see Xiao Anzi's butt being beaten to a bloody mess by the bamboo board. He ignored concubine Tianzi, whose expression was so gloomy that he seemed to be dripping ink, and rushed up to grab the bamboo board that was about to fall. When concubine Tianzi saw that Yi Yang dared to take care of the affairs in her palace, she breathed more and more and said in a cold tone, "Concubine Yi, what are you doing?" Yi Yang looked apologetic. "I'm sorry, I really don't want to care. The gossip in your palace. But the matter of Xiao Anzi is because of me. If I don't care, I will be sorry for my conscience. You also know that it is because of you that Xiao Anzi was beaten to death, and he should be killed. You feel guilty for the rest of your life. Concubine Tianzi looked icy cold, looked at the eunuch who stopped beside him, and said coldly, "Is this palace your master or concubine Yi?" This scared the two eunuchs all over and panicked. Lifting the bamboo board in his hand, he was about to continue hitting Xiao Anzi, who was getting confused. Yi Yang was really anxious when he saw Xiao Anzi's anger. He pounced on Xiao Anzi, and scared the two eunuchs next to him to stop in a hurry, and almost stopped the bamboo board that almost hit Yi Yang. "Concubine Yi, this is my Fuzi palace, not your Jinyang palace." Concubine Tianzi was in a hurry. She didn't expect that Yi Yang would dare to block his noble body from the humble servant in order to protect Xiao Anzi. Yi Yang was also angry in his heart and cursed Concubine Tianzi. "Are you still not human? This is a human life, a human life." He never thought that a human life, in the eyes of these people, is as low as an ant. A slave, betray your master. Damn it, Concubine Tianzi looked gloomy. This time Xiao Anzi betrayed her. Next time he is not sure that other people will betray her for other reasons. "Where did he betray you?" Yi Yang asked back. "This concubine has clearly banned it. Everyone in the Fuzi palace can't interfere in the affairs of other palaces. Anyone who violates it will die." Concubine Tianzi looked at Yi Yang, who was protecting Xiao Anzi, and was angry and didn't dare to do anything. She knew very well. Now Yi Yang is in the middle of the day. If she falls out with Yi Yang, she will not have a good time. Just when she was in a dilemma, Yi Yang said, "Master Tianzi, since you want to kill Xiao Anzi, why don't you sell him and give it to me? How much do you want? Just ask." "What, are you looking down on me?" Concubine Tianzi looked gloomy. If he asked her to sell Xiao Anzi to Yi Yang, wouldn't it just add to the jokes of others? No, I have absolutely no intention of that." Yi Yang shook his head again and again. "Since you don't have any intentions, then please go back." Concubine Tianzi directly ordered the expulsion of the guests. "Come here, send Concubine Yi off." Yi Yang glanced at Xiao Anzi, who had passed out in pain, and felt uncomfortable. No, he was clearly at an age loved by his parents, yet he was tortured by such inhuman beings, and he felt guilt. He raised his head, looked up at Concubine Tianzi, and said loudly, "Concubine Tianzi, today I think Yi Yang owes you a favor. If you have any difficulties in the future, you come to me. As long as it is not illegal, criminal or morally wrong, I will do my best to help." Concubine Tianzi was confused by Yi Yang and looked at Yi Yang with a bewildered expression. "What do you mean?" Yi Yang stood up, picked up the fainted Xiao Anzi and was about to leave. "Concubine Yi, what are you doing?" Concubine Tianzi was stunned. This Yi Yang was blatantly coming to her Fuzi palace to rob people. Yi Yang ignored Concubine Tianzi and left with Xiao Anzi. Concubine Tianzi's eyes were red with anger, and her hands creaked. "Yi Yang, if you dare to take Xiao Anzi out of the Fuzi palace, the bridge between the two of us will be forged." Yi Yang turned around, deeply glanced at Concubine Tianzi, and then left with Xiao Anzi. Xiao Doubting was in a cold sweat throughout the whole process. Seeing that Yi Yang really took Xiao Anzi away, although he agreed with Yi Yang to take Xiao Anzi away, he was afraid that Yi Yang would be retaliated against by Concubine Tianzi, and his heart was complicated. Lu Xuanzhou, who followed to watch the good show, saw Concubine Tianzi's expression gloomy, and he didn't dare to stay. He hurriedly followed behind Yi Yang and escaped from the low-pressure Fuzi palace. "Damn, Yi Yang. You wait for me." Concubine Tianzi looked at Yi Yang's retreating back, gnashing her teeth in anger. Yi Yang went to Fuzi palace to rob a young eunuch. This matter spread like wildfire in the palace, and there were many discussions that Yi Yang was bullying others, and even dared to bully concubine Tianzi. When concubine Ling learned about this, he naturally would not miss such a good opportunity. He hurried to Fuzi Palace, secretly trying to use concubine Tianzi's hatred for Yi Yang to get rid of Yi Yang. His abacus was fairy. But unfortunately Shui Chen had already guessed what he was thinking. The three of them sat in the main hall of Fuzi Palace, drinking tea in silence, and no one spoke first. Concubine Ling, who couldn't stand the atmosphere, finally put down the teacup in a hurry and escaped from the oppressive Fuzi Palace. After concubine Ling was gone, Shui Chen spoke slowly. "Cousin, what do we say? There is some blood relationship. The cousin doesn't want you to end in tragedy. I hope you can do it yourself. Yi Yang is now deeply loved by the emperor. Doting. Whoever wants to oppose Yi Yang is asking for trouble. He doesn't want his cousin to follow in the footsteps of the imperial concubine of the East Palace." Haha. Concubine Tianzi sneered twice, resting her jaw on her hand, and asked back, "I don't have the mind of my cousin. I can't be as generous as my cousin." Shui Chen asked back, "Is this a big issue? This is clearly a matter of life. Besides, it's just a servant. You can just be a favored person and give it to concubine Yi. Why do you have to make it known to everyone?" Shui Chen was really pissed off by these things. Obviously very small one thing, the whole palace must know about it. "I just can't take this breath." Concubine Tianzi became angrier the more she thought about it. She has been in the palace for several years, and she has never had any conflicts with other concubines. She lives cautiously and wants to live her own unrestrained life for a long time. Who knows that Yi Yang is so annoying, he has to come trouble her. Is there anything you can't swallow? Isn't it just a servant? Why should you be so angry? Shui Chen didn't understand why his cousin insisted on going with Yi Yang hard steel. This Yi Yang has broken the rules of my Fuzi Palace. He makes such a fuss. How can I manage the servants in my hall in the future? It was destroyed by Yi Yang. It makes sense. I was speechless. Shui Chen rubbed his aching brows, really wanting to ignore all these messes. Yi Yang didn't know that Shui Chen was in a daze because of his own affairs.